He's online with us now. Chief Constable Andy Marsh from the Avon and Somerset Police. For those of you from abroad, Avon and Somerset, southwest of England, a large and challenging police area to police. Extremely well done by Andy and his team there. Andy is going to be joined by some colleagues today, and we'll let Andy introduce them himself as we go through. But amongst Andy's many other roles there in Avon and Somerset, he is the National Police Lead for the Joint International Policing Unit. So without further ado, Andy, if I can hand over to you and your colleagues for the presentation, please.
Thank you very much, Bob. Can you just give me the thumbs up if you can hear me? Yeah, good.
Yeah, we can hear you. We're just getting your presentation.
Okay, I'm going to make a start and we're going to see some slides. So first of all, I want to thank Bob Broadhurst and his team for putting on this conference during COVID. Great challenge. Well done, Bob. I'm going to ask some questions of the audience today. And so, I welcome your engagement. I want you to think. It's a difficult thing to all be together virtually, but just to warm you up, perhaps if you're happy to use the chat, just stick in the chat the country that you're watching from today, because I'm going to be talking about international policing. So I'm the National Police Chiefs Council lead, working under Martin's coordination on international coordination of non-operational work. So that tends to be capability, capacity building, that sort of activity. I'm also the national lead for body-worn video. It will be relevant in my presentation. First introduced these as the first UK chief to personally issue them in 2014. And we have advised actually globally on how to use body-worn video. I was formerly chief in Hampshire for 3 years, and I'm going to talk about my experiences in Hampshire as well, so that's relevant. So I'm setting the scene for three colleagues. Three colleagues are going to talk to you about very different police deployments globally. I'm going to talk about the opportunities and the importance of international policing. But let me start with a question for you. What is the role of the police? I mean, that's a big one, isn't it? Depends on your context and your jurisdiction. And I could give you a long answer, which would include the Pelian principles. But let me just give you a short summary. To maintain public order and safety, to enforce the law, to prevent and detect crime, and to protect people and communities. So that's our role. We've just heard from Martin about how that role and mission has been expanded into COVID, and that's happened around the world. Now, the second question then is, if that's the role of the police, and we live in a global society, how can we possibly achieve that aim unless we actually have some global reach, global influence, some interoperability with colleagues around the world that are capable of working with us to achieve those ends? So never mind the mega trend of globalization, there are other issues that we need to deal with. The COVID pandemic, political instability, mass migration, digitalization, inequality, different and highlighted expectations, both of our customers, the public we serve, and our changing employee expectations. Now, I would say that international policing has got a role in addressing all of these wicked issues. So I'm going to talk about the purpose, the business of international policing as part of achieving outstanding policing for our communities. So that's the next slide. Thank you very much. I'm going to talk about those. Sorry, no, can we go back to the previous slide? Sorry, Karen. We go back to the. So we're going to talk about the benefits and opportunities of international policing and extending our reach. But in making the case for that, I'm going to talk about some of my leadership journey through policing and why this transpires. It's important to me. I've held this portfolio since 2015, so coming up for 5 years. And some of the events in my career caused me to think this is an incredibly important opportunity. Now, you see a picture up there on the slide of two little girls, Holly and Jessica. They were murdered in 2002 by the criminal that you see in the foreground, Ian Huntley. And they were murdered in the United Kingdom because police forces in the United Kingdom failed to talk adequately to each other, failed to share an understanding of who was dangerous, who was vulnerable, and manage that risk. And actually, we're all in policing, aren't we, to stop heinous and awful crimes like that. That's what gets us out of bed and brings us into work. So when I was thinking about wanting to be a chief officer back in 2005, burned into my consciousness was, what have we got to do to be outstanding to prevent this sort of crime happening? Now, actually, we had to work much better. Martin's role, coordinating forces in England and Wales. I cannot keep people safe in Bristol, Somerset, Bath, unless I can work with my colleagues across the United Kingdom around information, risk, technology. But you know what? That has suddenly scaled up. We can't succeed in the United Kingdom or England and Wales alone. We can't succeed in Europe alone. We are actually now part of a global entity. You'll see another badge up there, ACRO, ACRO. That's an office that I had responsibility for when I was Chief Constable of Hampshire. And that office is a clearinghouse for all conviction data between police forces in England and Wales and the rest of the world. Such an important thing in terms of keeping people safe. When I was in Hampshire as chief, I was lucky enough to work with some truly outstanding police officers, from chief inspector right through to superintendent. And you know, many of those police officers had served internationally. And so what I also learned about the role of international policing is that the exposure to it develops talented leaders in lots of levels, cultural competence, problem solving, and resilience. So my journey into international policing started with, how do we work better as a global law enforcement ecosystem? But actually seeing the problem as part of the solution is something that served me well in policing. So these cameras were developed significantly because citizens, members of the public, were recording officers with phones. We're going to do it more professionally. We will use these cameras. And actually, even as Somerset has become the most data-driven, data-led force in England and Wales, because my officers were blinded by a blizzard of data, and I wanted to harness it to give them the information to make smart decisions. Next slide, please, Karen. So if we're going to be effective in protecting our people at home and overseas, we must work globally with law enforcement. If we're going to do that, we need relationships, we need protocols. But if you're going to do that, you've got to have a capable law enforcement that you engage with. Relationships are really important in that. So if countries of the world that are important to the UK haven't got the capability or capacity to work with us in a way that helps us achieve our mission of protecting our people, my view is we should be working in partnership to help build that capacity and learn from those foreign law enforcement capabilities as well. Before I talk too much about upstream harm affecting safety in the UK, let me be clear in recognising there are plenty of unpleasant criminals that the United Kingdom exports to the rest of the world in terms of sex offending, and credit to our CEOPS and National Crime Agency in tackling that, but also in terms of people trafficking, serious organised crime, counter-terrorism, violence against women and girls, including female genital mutilation, forced marriage, many offences. We have an upstream effect, and then we experience a downstream effect also. Post-Brexit, for the UK, it's incredibly important for policing in England and Wales to gain our global influence and maintain those links that are so important to achieving our mission of delivering outstanding policing. Next slide, please. We also need to respond to our changing customer and staff expectations. As Martin said, we are no longer monolithic, slow-moving organisations that people want to join for life and stay with us forever, however well they get treated or not. We want, in my police force now, to be the most inclusive police force in England and Wales. That's because inclusive police organisations actually get greater productivity, greater engagement with our customers. Now, I think international policing will help us with that. But when we talk about engagement with our customers, the public, Bristol is a city of about 450,000 people. But believe it or not, in Bristol, 91 languages are spoken, 91. Now, how do I lead an organisation that is relevant to all of those people with all of those different ethnic backgrounds and differences that they bring to our communities? And actually, imagine the trust benefit, the supercharging that even a Somerset Constabulary gets from having an ongoing working relationship, sharing best practice or building capacity in Pakistan or Somalia, or within the Caribbean, significantly around our African Caribbean communities. Now, within many policing systems, and certainly within ours, trust and confidence is the magic stardust of policing. So international policing plays a role in gaining the trust and confidence of all of our communities, particularly the important diaspora communities. Another significant reason for doing international policing is that the United Kingdom is actually a safe market to trade in. Well, we know that, and one of the reasons for that is it's a relatively, comparatively low corrupt environment to work within. Actually, and this is again, we come post-Brexit, if the UK is to flourish, it needs to have relationships with safe markets globally. And one of the examples that we are doing with that, working in partnership with Her Majesty's Government and with the Department for Trade and Industry, is I'm working with UK suppliers. This is a UK camera, by the way, a Reveal Media, of body-worn video to actually help extend the reach to British markets, holding hands with trusted services that can help get the best out of these products. So just on body-worn video, for example, my view is that procuring and networking these things is about 10% of the task of how do you get benefit out of the use of body-worn video. The other 90% is on leadership, vision and practical use of it. So our best users, our super users, are like movie directors with these cameras. So we're holding hands with trade and industry in a number of different areas to help create safe markets. Next slide, please. Now, this vision for international policing has not been without its problems. The 5 years that I've led the portfolio through has been one of austerity. We should see, when Karen gets it up, a slide that shows just how significant the fall in police officers. Sorry, if you go to the next one, Karen, I think it will be a graph. The fall in police officers has been through austerity, many tens of thousands. There we go. Look, you can see that a high point of policing in 2009, and you can see where it is now. Now, actually, when you're going through tough times financially, it's very easy for organizations to become introspective. So at a time where I would say we should be expansive, we should shrink together and become closer to law enforcement around the whole world, it became more difficult to release police officers and police staff to support international priorities. And also, there's a question of funding. Local police and crime commissioners, local chief constables will not pay for work in other continents of the world. It needs to be funded centrally. The other problem is career pathways. Many police officers that we've sent overseas have suffered. When they get back, they're forgotten about. I would say international deployment should be a fundamental step up the promotion and career progression. It should not be a barrier. There is a lack of cross-government support in the UK. We need to work with the Home Office, the Foreign and Commonwealth Office, a stabilisation unit, and many more. But it's frustrating to try and work as a police officer across government, getting across government vision. So here we go with my last slide. Please, Karen. So we have made a lot of progress. You're going to hear about some fantastic case studies from some colleagues that have actually done very different sorts of international work. We've set up something called the Joint International Policing Hub. It's a brokering house for all international non-operational deployments. It was launched by me alongside the policing minister, Brandon Lewis, in 2017. And it runs a web-based facility that I can vet in consultation and agree all international deployments to make sure they're fit and proper for the values, ethics and purpose and operational independence of UK policing. Such an important thing not to deploy to the wrong missions. And I'm talking significantly about missions that might compromise our human rights compliance. So despite the drop in volume, and we should be doing more, in 2019-20, the financial year, we deployed to 76 capacity building operations in 58 countries in the world. So that is a significant number for a small number of people. Even during COVID, we're handling 5 requests a week, but many more are probably still missed. We need to catch those deployments and coordinate them. We have an emergency short notice deployment capability of 18 officers. They deployed when there was a collapse of law and order in Libya to help rescue with the military British citizens. They deployed in Operation Irma with many other UK officers in response to the hurricane. And they were ready to go to Lebanon in response to that bomb and not deployed. The stabilisation unit have a cadre of 50. We've just formed a much closer partnership with the Home Office, and there is a strong likelihood that we build a much more significant cadre of really capable UK police officers and staff to deploy, and we must send our best people abroad. That's part of my job, to make sure we get our best people. So for the future opportunities, and some people might be thinking about this in the audience, we have many UK institutions which are globally regarded for their educational standards. We could, perhaps should, if we want to extend our influence, hold hands with those educational establishments, operational policing, and start looking to work in partnership with massive markets. There are colleagues from China on, 2 million police officers in China. There may be a colleague from India on, 1.7 million police officers in India. And actually, we should be working with academia to identify good practice, to learn from global policing, but also to share our good practice and to build those communication or operational links to keep all of our people safe at home and overseas. So that concludes my presentation. If we move on to the first presentation, it's from Assistant Chief Constable Simon Blatchly. We can see him there. Good morning, Simon. In 2014, Simon was a senior advisor for the United Nations in Iraq. He was later evacuated, no doubt in a bit of a crisis, to Kurdistan, where he helped develop the Kurdistan police force. In 2015, he deployed to New York, served as the head of mission on the UN Police Division, overseeing inspection of 17 different peacekeeping missions globally. I'm pleased to say I had a nice visit to Simon in New York. In 2016, I also met him in Libya, and very proudly for the United Kingdom, he was UK Police Commissioner. He led a multinational team to ensure safe elections and prepare the Libyan National Police Immigration Drugs Enforcement Agency for the withdrawal of the UN mission. In 2018, Simon was awarded an OBE. He has bucked this trend of people being forgotten when they deploy overseas. Not only has he been awarded by Her Majesty the Queen recognition, he's been promoted to Assistant Chief Constable. He is, with great merit, the pin-up police officer of international policing for England and Wales. And it's my pleasure to introduce you, Simon.
Thank you very much, sir. If we could move to the next slide then, thank you. As Mr. Marsh said, Simon Blatchly, 31 years policing service in the UK, of which I spent 4.5 working for United Nations. As Mr. Marsh has said, that's sort of my experience within the UN. Coming back to the force, it was interesting listening to Martin Hewitt. I've been the Gold Commander for Operation Talent for Northamptonshire Police, where the assistance being given by NPCC on dealing with the COVID pandemic has been absolutely excellent. To move back to the United Nations, my intention is I'll give you a whistle-stop tour of my time in the UN, focusing on Liberia and what we achieved there using a multinational force, but also a little bit about UN policing for those that aren't aware, and also the strategic guidance framework. So if we could move on to the next slide, please. Thank you. Just a little bit of background on Liberia. It's in West Africa, Africa's oldest republic. Founded by the freed American Caribbean slaves. It's an interesting dynamic. It's a country that's never been colonised at all, yet traditionally most of the government officials come from that small 5% of the population that their roots come from America, and they very much have an American system of government with their police service and also with a president and a senate, etc. So it's almost they've modelled themselves on the American system. Civil war, as stated there, thousands killed, lots of atrocities committed. UN peacekeeping mission between 2003 and 2018, of which I was there for the last 2 years. When the UN moved in, effectively the UN was managing the police and the military together. Complete law and order had completely fallen down. So the United Nations role was to effectively build a police service from the bottom up, handover of power for the last 18 months to 2 years, and then draw down as we leave, leaving hopefully a successful policing service in its place. The added issue we had, of course, with the Ebola pandemic between 2013 and 2016. I came in at the end of that, and that added additional issues to actually policing within the country. Liberia is something like the 5th poorest country in the world, so you have to manage that with all difficult infrastructure as well. If we could move on, please. Thank you. Just a little bit about United Nations Police for those that aren't aware. Currently there's about 11,000 officers that are on secondment from over 90 countries across the world. Most officers are only there for 1 to 2 years, so it's an incredible recruitment operation. Currently, there's 14 peacekeeping operations where United Nations police are deployed. Policing operations can vary in size. When I was out in Iraq, there was only about 10 of us. In Liberia, at one point, there were about 2,500 police officers. As we drew down, that just came down to a few hundred. So it does vary the number of officers in each mission. You have a formed police unit, which for UK officers is similar to a PSU, but effectively it's 140 officers, all from the same nationality. They're generally there to provide your public order, support, patrols, etc. You also have individual police officers that are generally more specialist, and those are the ones that are generally using the capacity building to work with the host nation police, immigration service, etc., to build their skills up. As I said, initially in Liberia, they were acting as the police service. Then as time grew by, you take a step back so the Liberian National Police could take over. We also had specialist teams and civilian experts as well. Managing these 11,000 officers, you have the United Nations headquarters, which is based in New York, where I was for about 18 months as a Chief of Mission Management. That does all the coordination of the UN police activity within the peacekeeping missions. It has that oversight role. It also does the recruitment, and also we had an inspection facility. So effectively, people like myself would visit a peacekeeping mission in Africa, review, was it meeting the mandate Security Council had set? Was it achieving the goals for the 12 months? Report back, so a new mandate could be done for the following year if that's what the Security Council decided. And the final point, each peacekeeping mission, and particularly the UNPOL component, the UN police component, would have their own particular mandate for what was to be achieved in the upcoming 12 to 18 months. That was reported back to the Security Council in his resolution. So it was really key that you focused on what we were supposed to achieve while we're in there. Next slide, please. Thank you. Within the United Nations Police, some years in development is the strategic guidance framework. This, I don't believe, has sort of really landed internationally as much as they were hoping for. It was developed working with the EU, the African Union, and various other countries were involved in it. The idea was to actually give a framework for training, education, which could be used across all peacekeeping missions. The idea is a good one. Personally, as the police commissioner in Liberia, I had officers from 31 different nationalities, and obviously it can be hard enough in the UK to corral 43 forces with their ideas of, say, what community policing means. When you get officers from 31 different countries, all with a different concept of what good looks like, of what community policing or road policing looks like, it's quite important you have that overall structure in place. And that was the purpose of the strategic guidance framework, which we tried to use within Liberia. So the basics of police administration, capacity building, command structures. Within Liberia, we did introduce and train a gold, silver, bronze structure that's used within the UK. And then police operations, the day-to-day police work. Just trying to give that structure that the UNPOL from different nations could use when they're deployed. Okay, next slide, please. Okay, so within Liberia, United Nations mission in Liberia, the mandate that I had for the time I was there was the overall protection of civilians. Our core role was to protect civilians, reform of the justice and security institutions. This was develop the leadership, management, professional accountability of the Liberian National Police, the Immigration Service and the Drug Enforcement Agency. And then finally, the protection of UN personnel. During my time there, we handed over the responsibility of policing was with the Liberian National Police, with the UN effectively taking a step back and supporting them and guiding them, particularly as we went through to the national elections, both for the President and for the Senate. And we were supporting them as we worked through that. Next slide, please. Challenges we faced were, as already mentioned, this is one of the poorest countries in the world with limited technology, limited internet. Where there were records, they were written only, limited power. One of the failings that we made, definitely made as the United Nations, was we were there for sort of 13, 14 years. And we don't think there was that realisation how dependent the Liberian National Police were on us, particularly away from Monrovia in the far out border areas, where they were almost dependent on the UNPOL for transport, for internet. As we drew down and pulled UNPOL back into the centre in Monrovia, it was apparent the necessary systems and processes probably weren't in place. One issue we had was the quality of UN police. As Mr. Marsh mentioned, with international deployments, it's absolutely essential you have good quality police officers out. One of the issues I faced in Iraq was that where you could quite often have, with the host and member state in a post-conflict country, you can have well-educated police officers. So it's essential when you're putting UNPOL in to support men to guide, they do have the necessary skills and experience to do that. One of the challenges I faced is I didn't necessarily have the right quality of UNPOL in Liberia. Another issue we faced was the whole UN multi-agency. For those that aren't aware, there's 52 different United Nations agencies that don't necessarily speak to each other. And you can find that different agencies are doing a little bit different of work in, say, community policing. They're not necessarily talking to each other. Likewise, you find that a number of nation states are there clearly with their own embassies and their own engagement plans. So one of the issues you find is trying to coordinate those, and everybody has those different standards of what good looks like. An issue particularly for the United Nations is that most of the mandates are only 12 months long. So all of your plans and your budget is only for that 12 months. So it's very hard as a UN Police Commissioner to plan more than that 12 months, because at any given time, the Security Council can say, we're no longer deploying a police component to country X. So you're working on those 12-month plans. So you're in danger of doing the same thing just year on, year out without thinking the long term. Another issue you faced on the education and training side was that, as I've already mentioned, where you get a multinational bilateral working with other member states, one thing we found is you can have, say, a country comes in, delivers two weeks of public order training to the Liberian National Police, then they go away again. That can be a conflict of the training that we've been delivering, working with them over a number of years. And although that sort of member state in the country feels they might have delivered something, really the best way is to be that embedded officers, embedded working with the partners. So as well as the training, it's that constant follow-up and guidance and support that you can give to those post-conflict countries. With a drawdown coming, there's always the issue in the politics of knowing the UN were going to leave. There is always an issue with, well, the UN's going to be gone soon, so are they going to listen to us? The budgets were cut. And that level of support can fall when they know that the UN are pulling out. Next slide, please. Thank you. The positives, though, what I found was having that multicultural officers, getting the most of those experience, the training, the learning they had worked really well. Within Liberia, I found that the UN police, my predecessors, had obviously done a really good job in gaining the public and the community confidence in that the commonality between us all is that we wore the blue beret and we were trusted. So although we did not replicate the community that we served, different nationalities, different religions, different cultural backgrounds, over that period the UN were there within Liberia, we had built up that trust. And then working with that, it was working with the Liberian National Police to actually get the LNP to also have that trust with their staff as well. Having those embedded staff around Liberia, based in the headquarters, working out in the border areas as well, gains that trust, and you can have that influence with them. As we drew down, we focused more on the middle and senior management with that mentoring approach as we sort of drew down and pulled out of the country. Managed to establish joint working with the USA in particular, Ireland, Sweden, had joint meetings with the Liberian National Police. So we were focusing all of our capacity building activity on where it was needed, and we weren't duplicating. Tried something innovative using we had a Chinese formed police unit in Liberia that was very effective, highly trained, well skilled, and unusually for the UN, where traditionally the formed police units can just be used for public order issues, I also used them in a training role as well to actually capacity build the Liberian National Police, and also was able to link that with our protection of civilians role. of the public. By the time the elections came around in November 18, we were low in numbers, so we were able to do joint training using the Chinese Foreign Police Unit, the Nigerians, and also the Liberian National Police. So we're doing that capacity building as well as that dual role of protecting civilians as well. The key issue for me, and this is whether I'm in the UK or abroad, is the cutting bureaucracy. UN loves bureaucracy. So able to reduce the amount of bureaucracy backwards and forwards to New York, the reporting structures, focus on the outcomes and what we wanted to achieve. Going back to basics, as I mentioned there, because sometimes one of the issues you have as a first world country is you're trying to implement things using the latest technology. There was a failed control room system being put in by one of the member states. It needed sort of superb air conditioning units and highly trained officers to manage. That wasn't suitable for Liberia. So it's vital that you match the training and what you can do with the resources you have available. The picture you have there at the top there is actually a command post for the Loaford by-election. Limited technology, but a gold, silver, bronze structure, and that's the command team briefing. And it did work well, basically using a very basic radio system, basic mobile phone system for that command structure in a very isolated area to deliver a safe elections. We delivered a number of quick impact projects, and the focus again for me was that UNPOL delivered them quickly. One of the issues within the UN is some of the agencies, if you get funding, they can spend 50, 60% on bureaucracy and that sort of that project management issue. By using UNPOL directly to deliver those quick impact projects, we had some success in getting around the country, delivering workshops, training, so we were ready for the national elections. Thank you. And then the next slide. And the outcome, overall, for the first time in history, it was actually peaceful elections within Liberia. We really focused on the community policing approach, making sure the population were supported, they understood the policing approach, very much tried sort of that, a sort of UK style, if I can say that, engaging with the public early about how we're going to approach it. There were no deaths, there were no rioting, which is unusual in that position, and there was a peaceful transition of power between one government, one elected government, and another, which was very unusual. As you can see from the picture at the top, there was the high percentage turnout. Everything went ahead peacefully, and we were able to take that step away during that. Although we were out there monitoring this, most of this was delivered in the end by the Liberian National Police. However, one of the issues we had at post-election, because there is very much based on an American system, that command team we were working with, the bottom picture of the Inspector General of the Police, the Immigration Service, Drug Enforcement Agency, were all replaced. So for the last 2 months within the country, we were working with a completely different senior leadership team of the law enforcement agencies, which did become very hard. So all that learning had gone because at that senior level in Liberia, they're very much political appointees. Liberia clearly has a very small now UN country team working there, doing some capacity building with the police, but very much standing on its own 2 feet. Conscious it still has budgets issues, and in January 2020 there was public unrest as well because of allegations of corruption. But it was one of the better stories for the UN, I believe, built on over that period of 14 years, using overseas international policing, expertise, experience, and then sharing that with the Liberians, and then that slow drawdown as we left. That's me finished. Thank you very much. I'll go back to Mr. Marsh.
Simon, that absolutely fascinating insight into one aspect of a remarkable career. A key question for me, I think, to mull over is how does international policing ensure a dynamic and local response within a large bureaucracy? That's something that we even think about in medium-sized police forces like Avon and Somerset, and empowerment, I think, is important. So my next speaker, if you could switch your camera on, please, and your microphone, is Superintendent Alistair Roe. There he is, we see him. Alistair was deployed in Kosovo through EU LEX as a senior police advisor. He also worked in Bosnia-Herzegovina with the British Army as a strategic police advisor. He's done an exchange with the Turkish police, basing himself in Ankara. He could quite well have the nickname of Lucky because he was the match commander for Leicester City's remarkable Premier League win in 2016. Luck not shared, by another character in his career, King Richard III, who died in the Battle of Bosworth in 1485. Well, what's that got to do with Alistair? Alistair was the police commander for the exhumation of his body and reburial in 2015. He was once a semi-professional snooker player. The very fact that he's here today shows that he's not that lucky. Alistair, over to you.
Thank you very much. Good morning, everybody. Chair, delegates, thank you for inviting me to this seminar today. I hope my PowerPoint presentations are better than my snooker, that's for certain. So I'm here to talk to you about my time in Sierra Leone in 2019-2020.
Mr. Roe, I'll just stop you there. Your sound appears to have gone. Can you just check your audio?
Is that better? Are we back on? Can you hear me now?
No, I can't hear. Mr. Marsh,
no, you are back on, Alistair. Go ahead.
Okay, thank you very much then. Yeah, so Sub-Saharan West Africa, bordered by Guinea to the north and the east, and Liberia to the south. Slightly smaller than Liberia, slightly greater population. Capital Freetown was founded in 1787. This was a repatriation location for returning slaves. British a guy called Wilberforce bought some land, and this is where Freetown was born. Declared independent in 1961, and Sierra Leone remains part of the Commonwealth, one of 54 nations still within the Commonwealth. Population 7.9 million. It is 3/4 Muslim religion and roughly 21% of Christian religion. Extremely tolerant community, extremely tolerant nation when it comes to different faiths, different communities. Main languages are Creole, Mende, and English. I did study Creole, so not very well, I have to say, but I did my best and got some conversations going with my colleagues. Sierra Leone means Lion Mountains, and it is an extremely beautiful nation, as you'll see later on. So if we go on to the next slide, please. So you'll see there, back one, please. Yeah, the background. Sierra Leone Civil War ended in 2002. It is a stable country. It's one of the most peaceful countries in West Africa, but it is extremely poor. Something like 180 out of 187 in the countries in terms of poverty. And it was struck with some shocks after the war. So the Ebola outbreak in 2014-15 took 4,000 lives almost. And thereafter was a natural landslide. As you can see, the scarring in the bottom right-hand picture there, that scarring is still there. Took out a village August 2017 in the early hours of the morning, 1,000 victims, many bodies not recovered. That is a scar, it's a memory that is seen every day just outside of Freetown. And serious flooding that continues because of the infrastructure, because of the deforestation, and some of the poverty that's in the city. Serious flooding virtually every year, which has its catastrophic consequences, as you can imagine. But there is a future. There are opportunities. Life expectancy is increasing. It's 54, up from 40 some years ago. The median age is 19.5, so there is a high population, high proportion of well-educated, thrusting young Sierra Leoneans who want to make their country better than it is. The risk is, of course, well-educated young people are looking for opportunities elsewhere. So there's a real challenge there for the country and the government. Natural resources, tourism, beautiful beaches, beautiful locations, natural resources such as coffee, cocoa, gold, diamonds. But of course, there are then the poaching. The pangolin is a native animal there. It's almost been hunted to extinction. So there are lots of challenges, but there are opportunities as well. We go to the next slide, please. So I was deployed as part of the International Security Advisor Team, ISAT, which was the successor to the IMAT, which is the Military Monitoring and Training Team, coming out of the war in 2002. So this was established in 2013, a very small team, something like 9 in number, senior police advisors, senior military advisors, and national security advisors, supported by a small team of local staff, linking into the British High Commission, working closely with DFID, Department for International Development, which is now part of the Foreign and Commonwealth Office. This was funded through the Conflict Stability and Security Fund as part of the UK cross-government funding to support and tackle instability, support the activity to tackle instability and prevent conflicts that threaten UK interests. So DFID, a significant amount of money from the British government's budget to DFID, £150 million to DFID in pillars such as improving the health across the country, access to free health, access to free education from the youngest right through to university, establishing sustainable energy across the country, and extremely importantly, is protection of girls and women from gender-based violence, sexual-based violence, trafficking, and what we would consider in the UK domestic abuse. This was declared a national emergency by the President in 2018 and continues to be focused now. There's support through the USA, US Embassy, the Chinese, and the EU, heavy investors in not only security and justice, but of course the infrastructure, building new highways, new bridges, and providing additional support to the government agencies and NGOs. The next slide then, please. So the Sierra Leone Police, what is it about? A force for good. That is a line that is is a relevant strap line for them. It was established in 1894, and then in 1964, after independence, it remains a police, the Sierra Leone Police Force, pretty much in the same structure as it was back in 1964, but with heavy British policing influence, going back 10 and 15 years in terms of the structure and the way that prosecutions and right through to the court system and the corrections are maintained. So 12,000 police officers and staff. This includes everything from the Inspector General down to labourers, drivers, and uniform makers. So deployable police officers is significantly less. It is structured with operational support and organisational support pillars. So public order and firearms armed policing makes up 3,000 of those 12,000. So a significant amount of armed police and public order trained officers. They have been trained using the College of Policing, UK College of Policing, gold, silver, bronze, public order syllabus and curriculum. So they understand the role of policing around peaceful protests. They understand the use of force, reasonable force, and around the use of firearms. 6 regional territorial divisions across the country. They coterminous with the local authority, the local regions, with the capital being split, Freetown being split, Freetown East and West, purely because of the size and density. Organisational support, as you'd expect, for example, professional standards, corporate services, corporate communications, and corporate affairs. So a fairly standard structure and one that isn't complicated. An executive management board of an inspector general, a deputy inspector general, then 24 assistant inspector generals, which you'll see as I move forward is probably a bit top heavy, to say the least, and quite expensive for an organisation of that size. The government sits within the vice president as chair of the police council. Again, there was some discussion, some suggestions, recommendations around not having the Vice President of the country as the chair of the Police Council, and that is a recommendation that's been taken forward. And then there's a Minister of Internal Affairs. And working alongside that was the Office for National Security, so National Security Advisor, the Armed Forces, Immigration and Borders, Correctional and National Fire Force. So all part of that internal security sector, with the Armed Forces looking at the external as well. The next slide, please. So what is the role of Strategic Policing Advisor? There's a few snaps there of the work we were doing, not only in Freetown but outside, right up into the countries and right into the border with Liberia in the rainforest of Gola. So as part of a small team, as I mentioned earlier, the objectives are to deliver the British government strategic objectives to support Sierra Leone through its improvements and its own strategic direction to improve internal security, improve the Sierra Leone police governance and accountability, and contribute not only to security sector reform within that country, but to help with security and stability across that region. And that just gives you an idea of some of the locations that were visited outside of Freetown to deliver the message from ISAT, to offer the support around governance and accountability, moving away from providing financial support purely for training and equipment, which I'll come on to in a second. But the concept of community policing, neighbourhood policing, supporting local traditional chiefdom rules, regulations and traditions was something that was a challenge, but was slowly permeating across the country with the support of the regional directors at Assistant Chief Constable level, who really drove and understood the business. Next slide, please. So I guess through the successes, well, I'll pick a few of these out as we go forward. Being a member of the Sierra Leone Executive Management Board, being invited to sit at that table, and every Wednesday there's a board meeting, and I sat, so myself as Strategic Policing Advisor and my predecessor had sat to the left of the Inspector General. So that offered that access and influence. We were embedded in the police headquarters, an office along from the Inspector General's office, and we were available and open to every day for individuals to come and see us, whether it was a police constable that worked in corporate services, or whether it was one of the Assistant Chief Constables, Assistant Inspector General. So although we didn't have any voting rights, which are absolutely correct, we were there as advocates, we were there as listening, sensing the mood, being able to leave be a conscience to either the individuals or a collective executive management board.
Yep.
But the key was
Alistair, a couple of minutes, if you can, Alistair, please.
Yeah. So the strategic development plan, which is the top right-hand picture there, that was an important document that we funded, we supported, and through a citizens' perception survey, managed to get in place a document that holds the police to account for the next 5 years. Just move on to the next slide, please. Establishment review, looking at how the organisation was structured, using experts from the UK through the College of Policing, we were able to offer the Sierra Leone Police and the government options to adjust and reform their structure. And importantly, the second image down there, we introduced human trafficking, and as part of the new recruit syllabus, and which was a huge step. So human trafficking and smuggling is now part of the syllabus, not only for new recruits, but in-house training through the World Hope International NGO. So a fantastic piece of work that is now embedded as part of the curriculum. Next slide, please. Moving on to challenges. As you can see, some images there. Economic, as I've spoken about, a very tight budget that's given to the police service, very, very tight. 3.15 million is the net operating budget, £3.15 million for a whole year. So you can understand the consequences of that, not only in terms of being able to deliver, but the opportunities for individuals to be corrupt and offer corrupt practices to members of the police service. Political influence, similar to Liberia, top 2 jobs are appointed by the president. So there was an encouraging indication that they were going to, the government were going to open up a more transparent selection process in the future. Reputationally, Sierra Leone police need to be responsible for internal security, and the citizens and the government need to have confidence in the police. And that was one of the main challenges of doing this work with the Sierra Leone police, to take away that primacy from the armed forces and move it across to the Sierra Leone police. And that is work in progress, but it's a very positive sign that the military are stepping back from deployments to what are traditionally and correctly civilian police roles. And finally, more shocks. You know, COVID has hit the world, as we know. Sierra Leone is coping with this extremely well, based on its learning from Ebola in 2014, 2016. It's a small country, 7.9 million people, 74 deaths out of 2,900 cases. So proportionately and relatively, that's you know, it's low. But that's based on the fact that they have learned from the past, and they are moving forward with that learning. I think probably, Chief, that's my time up. I could talk all day and bore everybody with my ventures in Sierra Leone, but thank you for the time.
Thank you, Alistair. Fascinating and indeed, I think, a very successful small mission. So a different example to the multinational UN one that we heard about. So our final speaker is my brother in international policing, Inspector Mark O'Donoghue, a 26-year career detective, worked regionally, locally in counter-terrorism and serious and organised crime. He had a pivotal role setting up the Joint International Policing Hub over the last 5 years, and indeed leading it. And he's going to talk about a remarkable upstream effort in Vietnam to prevent harm in the UK and empower the local police. So Mark, are you able to join me, please?
Yes, so hopefully you can hear me.
Yeah, we can hear you. Go ahead, over.
Yeah, brilliant stuff. Right, good morning, everybody. A quick run through in respect of a project which the Joint International Policing Hub, in collaboration with the British Embassy and the modern slavery team at the Home Office, were involved in creating a human trafficking, modern slavery investigative program on behalf of the UK government. So Vietnam is a priority country for the UK in terms of combating human trafficking. And it was quite an eye-opener in October of 2019 when the Essex Lorry happened, where 39 Vietnamese victims died, which really focused an awful lot of the ongoing partnership and working that we were doing in Vietnam. But the actual background to all of this started in 2017. So the Home Office Modern Slavery Fund allocated £500,000 to a project of law enforcement capacity building on human trafficking investigation skills. And this was to be delivered in partnership with the Vietnamese Police Academy and the British Embassy. So in identifying and understanding the problems associated with Vietnamese-based modern slavery in the UK, in 2017, the GIF proposed that we could effectively tackle upstream issues at source and in partnership with local actors. So thus, we set a programme and an idea in motion, pitched the idea to the Vietnamese Police Academy and to very senior officers, who liked what the offer of the UK had to make in respect of engaging their police service in understanding and how to deal with modern slavery issues. And as Mr. Marsh alluded to earlier on, dealing with upstream issues is an important element in dealing with crime and local issues back here in the UK. But what is really striking about this piece of work at the early stages is what made it work. And the whole idea was about partnership, trust and collaboration, and true collaboration with our Vietnamese colleagues. So the actual program itself is a 3-year program delivering 24 courses, approximately 60 days or so, reaching almost 600 management and operational officers. And the delegates that usually attend these courses are made up of investigative police officers, border guards, prosecutors and judges. If I could have the next slide, please. So in addition to the courses, there are provision for evaluation workshops in respect of understanding how the work and the process of what we're actually delivering is suitable for our Vietnamese audience, and is it actually working on their behalf. So each workshop over the last number of years has been developing and evolving as time progresses, taking what works well and then what doesn't work well, and modifying the process as we go along. So as you'll see on the slide there, there's a photograph in respect of a number of the successful participants in the actual program itself. So in 2019, the GIF were able to contract a number of subject matter experts to assist in writing the training manual for this particular piece of program work. So it was in collaboration, as I say, but it was particularly agile in what it did, because it introduced the Vietnamese trainers into the program so that they could be fully immersed in the program itself and actually contribute and deliver as part of the training program. So what made COVID part of this whole program? Well, in March, as we're all aware, COVID happened. So it caused us to think how we could maintain standards of productivity but still be able to deliver what we were delivering prior to COVID. So courses were usually delivered in country, in Vietnam, but as a result of this, we had to use technology a little bit more agilely, and on the basis of that, we were able to create an innovation process and really trailblazing initiative where it was never been tried in Vietnam before, to create IT connectivity, remote learning, and working with Vietnamese interpreters, but also working with the time differences of 7 hours. And it was a truly collaborative effort. So the results of all of this effectively are this. When we set out to deliver the program, it was a case of, could I have the next slide, please? It was a case of, how do you teach a training program that would be have longevity, and that when the UK finally move away and depart from the Vietnam program, that it would leave the Vietnamese self-sufficient to be able to do the things themselves. So the idea and the mantra would be, if you can teach a man to fish, they would be able to feed themselves for the rest of their lives. So on the basis of that, with participants from all the various regions in Vietnam, the police, border guards, judiciary, and a workshop was created to understand how it was being delivered and what the feedback is. So ultimately, the feedback showed that 100% of participants actively used the training investigation manual as part of their day-to-day work. And on the basis of that, 60 to 7% of the participants confirmed that they all applied knowledge from training and investigations and involved it in as part of their day-to-day network and engaging with colleagues. So the high retention of that knowledge has been beyond training, shows how well it's been received by Vietnamese law enforcement and the community to which they serve. And one of the crucial factors for me in the whole program of this, Vietnam has always been a very didactic teaching mechanism or style within the universities. But over the course of the last 2 and going into the 3rd year, you can actually see the development of the trainers in themselves, in that they have a more participatory approach with the audiences of which they are teaching. So the ultimate benefit of all of this, and on the slide, you will see a comment which was made as part of the delivery evaluation program, where one of the participants actually stated that they coordinated with 2 provinces in Vietnam and rescued and provided support to victims, that they actually broke into a brothel just at the right time before 3 victims were to be transferred from Vietnam in potentially into China. So it's when you see something like that that you actually, and the Vietnamese have actually shown that the training program has focused their minds on understanding victim-focused approaches and then being able to achieve successes like that. And that is just one potential success out of a multitude of evaluation reports. So the program is due to run till March 2021, and then it will be reviewed, unfortunately, as part of the spending review. Hopefully a similar project will continue. But hopefully I've given you an essence of what the UK has been able to achieve from a policing element of teaching and collaboration with our Vietnamese colleagues. Sir, over to you. I hope I've covered that off sufficiently in the time allowed.
Mark, you did a brilliant job of summarising the benefits of what makes your intervention special is its low cost, high impact and sustainability. I'm going to hand back to Bob or Karen. I don't know whether we've got any time for questions, Bob.
Andy, that was fascinating. Thanks very much. We do have a couple of questions if you and colleagues have time. I don't know whether Simon and Alistair can rejoin us, but Karen's going to tee up a couple of questions, which it's been so fascinating we couldn't leave without a few questions. So Karen, can you tee us up with a question, please?
Okay, I'm just going to quickly, this is for Mark actually, from Karen Hunt. Is there an effective undercover CHIS system in place in Vietnam to deal, or are there judicial barriers to this, Mark?
It's not an area that I'm particularly involved in. They do have a CHIS element as part of their operational roles, but it's not something that we particularly focused as part of the training program. The whole focus potentially was about getting officers to understand what they could achieve as part of the investigative process, but also to be more victim focused. I am aware that they do use CHIS, but it wasn't something that I'm able to really comment on in any great depth, I'm afraid. I'm sorry.
Lovely. Thank you, Mark. Sorry. Okay. Next question for the panel. How much of a challenge will Brexit be to the relationships with European police forces?
So if you, it's politically this is a charged question. We have got great contingencies for fallback plans around exchange of convictions, data, intelligence, property tracking, arrests, extradition, many of which unfortunately won't benefit from the slick automation that's built up over many years, but we have a fallback plan. I think probably more importantly, we need to be reaching out to law enforcement around the world now and making sure that our relationships are strong. And I think like anything, you know, I talked about how we respond to the challenge of data exchange, citizen journalism, globalization. We can't control Brexit in policing, so we must now seek opportunities to address the weaknesses and shortcomings. So that's what my team will be doing these next few months and years.
Karen, I have just one. If I can just ask a question, Andy and team, for myself. I've been working in Lebanon for the last 6 or 7 years, and like Mark, COVID has stopped me going out there, but I still have weekly team meetings and mentoring meetings. One of the issues for us out there is we represent UK government through the embassy there, but there are other players, the French in particular, the US who supply them with kit, and the Lebanese have a habit of cherry picking what they want. How do you overcome those issues? It would certainly help me for a bit of guidance.
So the beauty of what Mark and Alistair did was a more of a you know, a single engagement by the UK. Perhaps Simon is an expert at dealing with multinationality engagements.
Yeah, to take that point, is exactly the problems that I was facing in Liberia, where you get different embassies with engaging, and that's what we found with the Liberians, particularly with such a poor country. If they would take on 5 different sorts of community policing training, especially if there was some travel involved. So what I did, I was able to corral for 12 months anyway, a central meeting that ended up meeting on a weekly basis just to ensure the conflicting training was all coordinated, and there was sort of, okay, who's leading on to community policing, who's going to put the resources into that, who's leading on that. It was like herding cats to try and achieve that. And I know when I was working in Iraq, it was never achieved. It was just a scattergun approach by the international community. And I don't think it does that sort of host nation member state any good at all when we do that. But in Liberia, I was able to coordinate sort of about the 8 main players to ensure it was all focused. It did help. We were going into elections and going into drawdown of the mission. So it focused everybody's activity to get the best of the money and the budget that was available.
Simon, that sounds very familiar, but thank you so much for that, and indeed all of you for your presentations. Mr. Marsh, I'm going to have to call a halt to it there just to get us back on time, but your inputs and your teams have been fascinating, and given the global nature of our audience and the work that we're trying to do here at the London Policing College, I can't thank you enough for your inputs. I'm sure we'll get lots more of the chat and it will help us when we write this all up. So Mr. Marsh and all of your team, Mark, Simon, Alistair, thank you so much for your time today and for your generous inputs.
Thank you very much, and to my team. Thank you.